Hi everyone, welcome back to DGMZ, Diwan-e-Ghalib, Meri Subani. To all our returning viewers, we are very happy you could join us again. And to the new viewers, we are delighted you discovered the podcast and decided to tune in for the first time. Now, if you were with me in the previous episode, you know that currently we are going through Ghazal 34 from Diwan-e-Ghalib. We've already covered the first two couplets. Today we are going to pick the third couplet. As always, I'm going to read the couplet first, then we will get into an approximate translation, pick up the keywords, key concepts, and finally get into the DGMZ impression of the couplet. So, allow me to read to you couplet 3 from Ghazal 34 from Diwan-e-Ghalib. बुलबुल के कारोबार पे है, बुलबुल के कारोबार पे है खांदा-haa-e-Gul. बुलबुल के कारोबार पे है खांदा-haa-e-Gul, कहते हैं जिसको इश्क खलल है दिमाग का. A very famous couplet from Ghalib, quoted many times by many people. So it is going to be a pleasure to finally get to do a DGMZ impression for it alongside you all. So let's do a quick approximate translation. बुलबुल के कारोबार पे है खांदा-haa-e-Gul, कहते हैं जिसको इश्क खलल है दिमाग का. At the routine activities, at the doings of the nightingale, are the smiles of the roses. ये तो गलत है, हमने इसको चेंज किया था. All right, we'll try the approximate translation again. First line, बुलबुल के कारोबार पे हैं खांदा-haa-e-Gul. In response to the daily dealings of the nightingale is the smiling of the rose. Second line, कहते हैं जिसको इश्क खलल है दिमाग का. What is called love or passion is in fact a violation of the mind. Hopefully the approximate translation itself has intrigued you immensely. All right, so let's start picking the keywords. First word, Bulbul. One of the key actors in today's couplet, right? Bulbul is the nightingale, the singing nightingale. The zoological name is Lanius Bulbul. But for Urdu poetry, for mysticism, in Sufism, Bulbul is the personification of the lover. इस पे हैदर अली आतिश का ये शेर, ये आरजू थी तुझे गुल के रूबरू करते, हम और बुलबुले बेताब गुफ्तगू करते. One of our favorite couplets here at DGMZ. The approximate translation is, I had a desire. And of course the couplet is addressed to the beloved. Beloved, I had a desire to keep you face to face with Gul, that is rose. And then I and the nightingale would have a conversation, would have a exchange of ideas, right? As the lovers. So Bulbul is the lover to the rose, and I am the lover to you, beloved. And then with you and the rose sitting face to face, me and nightingale would exchange notes as lovers. Beautiful couplet. Moving on to the second word, Kaarobaar. Kaarobaar translates to any kind of business, any kind of trade, any kind of employment, livelihood, right? Something that you do as a daily routine, usually to earn money, to sustain yourself. But money, no money, this is your daily routine. This is your daily workload. This is your daily work schedule. That is Kaarobaar. It has many nuances to it. इस पे फिराक गोरखपुरी का ये शेर, तुझे घाटा ना होने देंगे कारोबारे उल्फत में, हम अपने सर तेरा ए दोस्त हर एहसान लेते हैं. So the approximate translation is, we will not let you go in a loss in terms of business of love. Dear beloved, we will take on our head every single favor of yours. We will take it over our head. We will account for it. So don't worry. You can put anything and everything on our head as far as this transaction of love goes. We will take it on so that you don't face any losses. We will face all the losses. Again, beautiful couplet. Moving on to the next word, Khanda. Key word in our couplet today. And you will understand why once we move forward into the impression. So, Khanda translates to a smile, a laugh, right? Sometimes it can be a funny laugh, sometimes it can be a quiet smile, sometimes it can be a sarcastic smile, but basically that expression of laughter and smile is Khanda. इस पे मीरा जी का एक शेर, नहीं गिरिया और खांदा में फ़र्क कोई. It's a lovely couplet, again a favorite at DGMZ. नहीं गिरिया और खांदा में फ़र्क कोई, जो रोता गया दिल तो हंसता गया दिल. What a couplet. What a couplet. So the approximate translation is, there is no difference in the crying and the laughing. There's no difference. The heart that went weeping is the heart that went laughing. There are so many layers to this couplet, but simply put, on the surface, the heart which is crying in grief, in pain, in separation, is the heart that will ultimately land up smiling and laughing. Because in love, if you're crying, if you're lamenting, if you're weeping, that is not a loss. That is not a loss. That does lead to ultimate fulfillment, even in those acts which on surface might seem like loss. Alright, so that takes care of Khanda. Moving on to Gul. Now this is the second actor in today's couplet. The first was Bulbul, which is nightingale. Second is Gul. So Gul translates to rose, but it can also generically be used for any flower, any blooming flower. In Urdu poetry, many times it is used to describe the beloved who is considered to be flower-faced, right? Face like a flower, lips like a flower. So it might be used in that sense also, but the actual translation is rose. इस पे मीर तकी मीर का बहुत 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 मशहूर शेर, वेरी फेमस कपलेट फ्रॉम मीर तकी मीर. पत्ता पत्ता बूटा बूटा हाल हमारा जाने है, जाने न जाने गुल ही न जाने, बाग तो सारा जाने है. Very closely connected to the theme of our couplet today, right? So the approximate translation is, leaf after leaf, bud after bud, knows my state, knows my condition, and my as in me, the lover. It's just that rose that doesn't seem to know about my state and condition. Otherwise, believe me, the entire garden knows. And here the lover is embodying the nightingale role, right? Wherein, thanks to the songs of the nightingale, the entire garden is aware of its presence. The nightingale and the lover personified in it. It's just the beloved, the rose, that seems to be unaware. Alright, so that takes care of Gul. Moving on to our next keyword, Ishq. Whenever we encounter this word, we say we are not going to get into the meanings because it's a heavy loaded word. But today we will just do it uh, to maintain the continuity of our keywords. So Ishq, I like the way Rekhta, and we refer Rekhta a lot during our research. Rekhta described Ishq not as love, which would be our first instinct, right? Ishq equals love. Rekhta defined Ishq as excessive or passionate love, all-consuming love. And we found that very, very interesting. We found that very apt. That's a very astute way of describing Ishq. Ishq is not just love. It is a love, especially when referring to Ishq in Urdu poetry, this is an all-consuming love, right? This is that excessive, intense, bordering on madness kind of love. So that is Ishq. इस पे अहमद फराज का ये शेर, इश्क भी खेल है नसीबों का, खाक हो जाए कीमिया हो जाए. So the approximate translation is, love is a game of destiny. You will become dust and you will alchemize into something rare, something which is one of its kind. Such is this game. It's all in your destiny. All right, moving on to the next word, Khalal. Interesting word. So Khalal, simply put, is some kind of interruption, right? Some kind of break, some kind of disruption, right? So there is a particular arrangement, there is a particular order, and if something goes and disrupts that, that would be Khalal. इस पे राहत इंदौरी का शेर, उसकी याद आई है सांसों जरा आहिस्ता चलो, धड़कनों से भी इबादत में खलल पड़ता है. Lovely couplet. The approximate translation is, at this moment her memory has arrived. Therefore, my breath, slow down, stop, because even heartbeats can interrupt, can disrupt the reverence, the worship I am doing right now of her memory that has arrived. So stop breathing, my breath stop, my heartbeat stop. You might interrupt or disrupt my worship. All right, and then our last keyword of the couplet, Dimaagh. So simply put, brain, right? But also used to describe wisdom, knowledge, intellect, thought, imagination. And of course, the negative nuances would be vanity, arrogance, pride, right? All this also would reside in the brain. इस पे again राहत इंदौरी का एक शेर, कभी दिमाग, कभी दिल, कभी नज़र में रहो. कभी दिमाग, कभी दिल, कभी नज़र में रहो, ये सब तुम्हारे ही घर है, किसी भी घर में रहो. What a lovely couplet, right? So the approximate translation is, sometimes in my mind, sometimes in my heart, sometimes in my eyes, reside. These are all your homes. Beloved, you decide where you want to reside. All right, so that takes care of all the keywords, quite a few today. Now let's start getting into our impression. Fair warning, extensive impression today. All right, so बुलबुल के कारोबार पे हैं खांदा-haa-e-Gul, कहते हैं जिसको इश्क खलल है दिमाग का. Before we get into the impression, we will have to put for you a background context to the Gulo Bulbul dynamic that is playing very, very intrinsically in the background of this couplet. This couplet will be our second opportunity to explore the so endearing Gulo Bulbul theme. Our first opportunity came in Ghazal 26, verse 7. Another episode that focused on the Gul theme was pretty recent, in Ghazal 33, episode 1. So feel free to access these episodes if you want to get additional context and want to enjoy this theme even more. For today's episode, we will begin by setting up the background context to the Gulo Bulbul theme in Urdu poetry, since without that, it will, number one, be very difficult to understand this couplet, and number two, almost impossible to enjoy it. So, the Gulo Bulbul, Rose and Nightingale theme holds profound and central relevance in Urdu poetry, particularly in the Ghazal tradition. Gulo Bulbul is a foundational and enduring metaphor used to represent the dynamic of love, longing, and profound relationship between the passionate lover and the beautiful beloved. Bulbul, the nightingale, symbolizes the ashik, the lover, who is deeply and madly in love with the rose, passionate, devoted soul, constantly singing of longing and devotion. Its song is often seen as the lament for the beloved, as it endures pain and separation from her. The bulbul's devotion is all-consuming and is often described as passionate madness. The Gulo Bulbul symbolism also helps us understand two key Sufi concepts. Number one, earthly love, ishq-e-majazi, between the bird and the flower, that mirrors the mystic, intense devotion to God, which is ishq-e-hakiki. The usual narrative of the Gulo Bulbul details how the nightingale sings tirelessly, sacrificing its peace, while the rose remains often unaware or unresponsive. The narrative highlights themes of sacrifice, fida, longing, arzu, madness, junoon, and the spiritual journey, fana. The Gulo Bulbul motif remains one of the most powerful and recognizable allegories in the rich tradition of Urdu Ghazal, offering endless possibilities for exploring love's complexities. So, that is a brief background in the Gulo Bulbul theme, but more importantly, how intricately it is weaved in the Ghazal tradition, in the Urdu poetry tradition. Now, coming back to our first line, Bulbul ke Kaarobaar pe hain Khanda-haa-e-Gul. So let's pick Bulbul ke Kaarobaar first. Kaarobaar is an interesting word, like we covered in keywords, which means business, work, affairs, dealings, transactions, etc. But in Urdu poetry, it takes a more nuanced meaning. Kaarobaar, in context to the beloved or the lover in Urdu poetry, is even more specific. What the lover and the beloved do as their daily routine activities, as their daily dealings, is very different to the non-lovers around them or the non-beloveds around them. For the beloved, by extension Gul, it's all about embodying beauty and grace within her and around her. फैज़ अहमद फैज़ का ये शेर, गुलों में रंग भरे बादे नौ बहार चले, चले भी आओ कि गुलशन का कारोबार चले. Again addressed to the beloved, the approximate translation is, so that color can be filled in the flowers, so that the breeze can flow, the spring breeze can flow and make its rounds. Please come into the garden, so that the business of bloom and spring stays intact, so that spring stays in business. Beloved, step into the garden. As soon as you do that, the breeze will do its work, the flowers will get their color, and spring will stay in business. So that is Kaarobaar, very specific to the beloved. Now for the lover, which by extension would be Bulbul in our couplet today, it's all about embodying love and passion. That is its Kaarobaar, right? So the nightingale and the lover, their Kaarobaar is embodying love and passion within him and around him. इस पे रिंद लखनवी का ये शेर, आ अंदलीब मिल के करे आ ओ जारियां, तू हाय गुल पुकार मैं चिल्लाऊं हाय दिल. So the approximate translation is, the lover is addressing the nightingale and saying, "O nightingale, come on, join me in lamenting and sending out sighs of deep anguish and pain that will rip the heavens apart. I will lament and cry out for my heart, you lament and cry out for your rose." So that is the Kaarobaar of the lover. In today's couplet, when Ghalib mentions Bulbul ke Kaarobaar, he is specifically referring to the nightingale's activity, doings, which the nightingale does with a determined single focus, and that is to sing and lament about its love and longing for the rose. Let's now move to the second part of the first line. Khanda-haa-e-Gul. Now, in today's couplet, when Ghalib mentions Khanda-haa-e-Gul, he is specifically referring to the rose's Kaarobaar, its daily activity, its daily doings, which again it does with determined single focus. And what does it do? Smile as it blooms, spreading its fragrance and color which was concealed and trapped inside its bud. दाग-दहलवी का ये शेर, चमन में नाज बुलबुल ने किया जो अपने नाले पर, चटक कर गुंचा बोला क्या किसी से हो नहीं सकता. So the approximate translation is, when in the garden the nightingale started talking about their laments and songs with pride, the rosebud immediately blossomed, cracked open, and said, well, the difficult task can be done by anyone, right? So sure, you singing and lamenting is a difficult thing and is something to be proud of, but there you go. I have wrenched open my heart and I have cracked open my bud, and now I am blooming and smiling. So that takes care of Bulbul ke Kaarobaar and Khanda-haa-e-Gul. Now, ab bacha Pe. What's left in the first line is Pe. Now Pe is a connector, right, which will connect two things. It can be interpreted in more than one ways, and the way we interpret it for today's couplet will decide the impression of this first line. So in DGMZ's humble opinion, there are two ways to interpret this. One is where Pe is at someone, and the second way to interpret is in response to someone. So we will look at the line in both versions, and then we will let you know what we at DGMZ picked for our impression. So the first option is where Pe is at someone. In this option, the smiling rose, right, is actually smiling at the laments, at the songs of the nightingale. The rose is finding these persistent love songs and laments of the nightingale funny and entertaining. and is laughing them off, almost mocking and ridiculing the nightingale for its persistence. In the second option, the pe would be where the rose is smiling in reaction, in acknowledgement, in reciprocation to the love songs and laments of the nightingale. This smiling of the rose or gul is actually the tearing open and baring of the gul's heart in response to the love and pain of the nightingale's love songs. Therefore, in this narrative, the rosebud develops deep and intense longing in its heart. And this longing and pain tears open the bud's heart and spills out, transforming it into a blooming and seemingly smiling rose. So, in the first scenario, the rose is smiling and laughing at the nightingale's song. Here, pe will mean at. And in this second scenario, the rose is smiling and laughing in reciprocation to the nightingale's song. Pe here will mean in response to. Now, Ghalib uses pe in this couplet to once again create his famous crossroad, where as a reader you will find yourself looking at more than one paths of meaning, and you will need to choose which one you think makes best sense for this couplet, because all of them will make sense. That was the mastery of Ghalib. So there is no wrong path. That pe can also work, this pe can also work. Which one will you choose? Which one will we choose? So at DGMZ, we picked the second scenario, where the rose smiles and blooms in reciprocation, in response to the nightingale's song. This was the option that passed the DGMZ test for us. This option is used by Ghalib in other couplets also, and we will share two of them with you. The first one, कहता है कौन नालाए बुलबुल को बेअसर, पर्दे में गुल के लाख जिगर चाक हो गए. So the approximate translation is, who says that the songs and laments of the nightingale went waste, go waste? In the veil, under the veil of the smiling rose, there are 1,000 hearts that were ripped open, torn open, wrenched open in response, in reciprocation to the laments of the nightingale. Second couplet from Ghalib, बाग में मुझको ना ले जा वरना मेरे हाल पर हर गुले तर एक चश्मे खून फिशा हो जाएगा. And we have covered this as part of our impression. So the approximate translation is, don't take me into the garden. Otherwise, on my state and condition, each and every dew-drenched rose will transform into a blood-scattering eye. Both these Ghalib couplets capture the strong pain and longing-filled response of the rose or gul to the nightingale or the bulbul. The first couplet describes 1,000 cuts and tears the rose bears on its heart in response to the nightingale's song. And the second couplet describes the bloodshot, blood-scattering eyes of the rose in the garden in response to Ghalib, the lover's condition, which reminds the rose of their own nightingale lover. Therefore, the final DGMZ impression for this first line, Bulbul ke Kaarobaar pe hain Khanda-haa-e-Gul, is in response to the daily dealings, workings, actions of the nightingale, is the smiling of the rose, which by extension means in response to the daily, consistent and continuous single focus activity of the nightingale of singing love songs for the rose, the smiles of the rose happen. In fact, all the flowers of the garden owe their blooming smiles to the heart-wrenching love songs of the nightingale. तिलोक चंद महरूम का ये शेर, महरूम चाके सीनाए हर गुल में है वो चीज़, तासीरे नाला हाय अनादील कहें जिसे. So the approximate translation is Mehroom, and the poet is referring to himself. In the slit, torn, fissured hearts of every rose lies that thing that we call the effect, the impact of the lamentation of the nightingale. Every blooming flower in its heart carries the song of the nightingale, because that is the song that ripped open, wrenched open the heart of the bud and made it bloom. Now, as we all told you, we will repeat one more time that many have interpreted this first line as the smiles being mocking, ridiculing the nightingale at its persistent effort to woo over the beloved, which is the rose. And that impression is equally valid. But like we always say at DGMZ, always pick and understand Ghalib basis how he speaks to you. You do not take Ghalib ready-made from anyone. You make your own Ghalib. So this is what spoke to us, we picked it, but if the other one speaks to you, then that is your impression. Alright, moving on to the second line. कहते हैं जिसको इश्क खलल है दिमाग का. What is called passion or love is in fact a violation of mind. A simple line in terms of words and word complexes, very easy to translate, but packs a punch in terms of meaning. Ghalib leverages this second line masterfully for two objectives. Number one, summarize the gist of the happenings between Gul and Bulbul in the first line. Number two, make an independent, matter-of-fact statement about love, which reads simple but hits hard. So, we will do the impression for the second line basis these two objectives. Let's pick the first objective. How is Ghalib leveraging this second line to summarize the Gul-o-Bulbul happenings of the first line? Well, in DGMZ's humble opinion, both Gul and Bulbul, Rose and the Nightingale, under the influence of their hearts, love, passion and longing for each other, are behaving in a way that beats all reason and rationale of the mind. The lover in the Nightingale tirelessly and continuously sings and laments for its beloved, the rose. The lover in the Nightingale is passionate, devoted and tormented. It sings its heart out with a soulful, melodious lament, fuga or ahozari for the rose. Bulbul knows very well, the nightingale knows very well, that its love for its beloved Gul or rose is destined to either be unrequited or doomed by separation. And even then, despite having no hope for union, the Bulbul stays true to its heart and true to its beloved, contrary to all reason and rationale. Gul, on the other hand, personifies the beloved, who, unlike the lover, does not have the privilege of openly and publicly indulging in the pain of her longing and passion for the Bulbul. So Gul communicates her passion and longing to her lover Bulbul in an almost cryptic way, which only he can understand. On the surface, for all onlookers and general public, the rosebud smiles as it unravels and blooms. But for the Bulbul, the lover, the nightingale, the rosebud tears open her heart, in response to the nightingale's love songs and unravels and blooms. Both Gul and Bulbul have a self-destructing destiny on the path of love. Bulbul, when it gets to come close to Gul, will bear the cuts and wounds from the thorns around it, which would be self-destructive. And Gul, whenever it will bloom in response to the songs of the Bulbul, will initiate the withering end of its short blooming life. Despite no gains and only losses, despite no guarantees and only risks, the Gul-o-Bulbul love story will unfold in every garden, every spring, again and again, against all odds, all reason, all rationale. So that is the first objective. इश्क कहते हैं जिसको इश्क खलल है दिमाग का. The Gul-o-Bulbul story is the embodiment of the fact that what you call love is actually a violation of mind. You behave in love which beats all rationale, all logic, all reasoning. Now, moving on to the second objective of the second line, where Ghalib is making a matter-of-fact statement about love which reads simple but hits hard. Before we get into explaining this second objective, we wanted to highlight an interesting feature of the Ghazal art form which Ghalib has leveraged to the maximum in this second line. So, Ghazal follows a very traditional, rigid, structural criteria that requires a strict meter, beher, a consistent rhyme scheme, kafiya, and a repeated refrain, radif, throughout the Ghazal. But Ghazal has flexibility in terms of theme. A thematic disunity, if you may, that allows each individual two-line couplet of a Ghazal, which we call sher, to have a complete, self-contained expression of an idea which does not need to relate thematically to the other couplets in the same Ghazal. And that is what makes Ghazals so enjoyable, especially when it is from a maestro like Ghalib. If a Ghazal has 7 couplets, every couplet can be a mini story. Total mini story. That's why we take like 1 hour to explain one couplet, right? I mean, you can, and the next couplet can be a totally different story. And the next one can be a totally different story. It's like going through a storybook with different stories, not same chapters of the same story, as you would have to do if you were writing in the Nazm art form, right? But here in this couplet, we see Ghalib take this thematic disunity to the next level, where in the same couplet itself, it seems the second line can very well exist as an independent statement, or even a famous quote on love, without having to be connected to the first line at all. Yes, it can be connected, but it can also remain totally disconnected, independent of the first line. कहते हैं जिसको इश्क खलल है दिमाग का. So just something to make a note of. Just the mastery, right? Okay, coming back to the second objective of the second line. As an independent statement or quote, this line has timeless charm and a truth that transcends time. Love indeed cannot operate but the reason and rationale of the brain. In fact, love is an emotion that will require pure, true emotion to drive it. The reason and rationale of the brain cannot drive love, at least not for too long. The risk-averse brain contradicts the risk-prone heart every step of the way. अकबर अलाहाबादी का ये शेर, इश्क नाजुक मिजाज है बेहद, अक्ल का बोझ उठा नहीं सकता. The approximate translation is, love comes with a very fragile and delicate temperament. It cannot bear the burden of brain, wisdom, intellect, analysis, reason, rationale. अल्लामा इकबाल का ये शेर, अच्छा है दिल के साथ रहे पासबाने अकल, लेकिन कभी कभी इसे तन्हा भी छोड़ दे. The approximate translation is, yes, it is good that close to the heart should be the guardian of brain, but there are times when you should leave the heart alone by itself, with no guidance from the brain, away from the brain. It is advisable to do that. And then अल्लामा इकबाल का एक और शेर, अक्ल को तनकीद से फुर्सत नहीं, इश्क पर अमाल की बुनियाद रख. The approximate translation is, the brain does not get done with the criticism and the analysis and the assessment, right? So therefore, if you want to build a foundation for your hopes and expectations and wishes, love is a better option in terms of foundation for your hopes and expectations. Brain is not. And then last one, खुमार बाराबंकी का ये शेर, अकल और दिल अपनी अपनी कहें जब खुमार, अकल की सुनिए दिल का कहा कीजिए. The approximate translation is, when the heart is telling you what they want and the brain is telling you what it wants. When the heart is telling you what it wants and the brain is telling you what it wants, Kumar, and the poet is referring to himself, then listen to the brain, but do what the heart asks you to do. Ghalib in the second line states that the breaking free from the reason, rationale of the brain, the disruption in the working of the mind, the violation of the risk-proof planning of the brain, that right there is love. Ishq Khalal hai Dimaagh ka. Alright, so that takes care of the second line, कहते हैं जिसको इश्क खलल है दिमाग का. What we call passion and love is in fact violation of the mind. Now, as always, let's take a few minutes to step back and look at this couplet in totality. The couplet indeed is a celebration of love, a celebration that highlights in vivid detail themes of both human and mystical love, longing and transient nature of beauty and life. Gul-o-Bulbul motif is almost a universal language used by Urdu poets and shairs to express the complexities of love, separation and pain of unrequited affection, which are all central themes in the Ghazal art form. So integral are Gul-o-Bulbul to Urdu poetry that classical Urdu poetry, especially the Ghazal art form, was often described as Gul-o-Bulbul Shairi. So interesting, right? The art form itself was called Gul-o-Bulbul Shairi or Gul-o-Bulbul poetry. Such was the inclusion of this motif in Ghazal and Urdu poetry. Urdu poets evoke a whole world of associated emotions and scenarios by using these two symbols of Gul and Bulbul, allowing for intricate allusions and deep layers of meaning. Ghalib the maestro has done exactly that in today's couplet. Ghalib unravels a timeless love story that plays in every garden during spring between Gul and Bulbul. Ghalib, on one hand, highlights in the Nightingale song the intense, unshakable persistence of the lover, which is publicly on display for all to see, and on the other hand, highlights the private yet equally intense, heart-wrenching response of the Gul as it tears open its heart in her longing for the Bulbul, under the camouflage of smiling and blooming. And while the Gul-o-Bulbul story unravels in this couplet, it's almost as if on a parallel screen we see the lover and beloved playing out their love story pretty much similarly. राजेंद्र नाथ रहबर का ये शेर, जब किसी फूल पे गश होती हुई बुलबुल को सहने गुलजार में देखोगे तो याद आऊंगा. The approximate translation is, when on a flower you will see a nightingale faint in the courtyard of garden, you will remember me. You will remember me, beloved. हैदर अली आतिश का ये शेर, शागिर्द तर्ज़े खांदा ज़ानी में है गुल तेरा, उस्ताद अंदलीब है सोज़ो फुगा में हम. So the approximate translation is, in the style of smiling and laughing, the rose is your disciple, beloved. And in the anguish and lamentation, I am the master to the nightingale. And then last one, फिराक गोरखपुरी का ये शेर, अरे सयाद हमी गुल हैं हमी बुलबुल हैं. लवली. अरे सयाद हमी गुल हैं हमी बुलबुल हैं, तूने कुछ आह सुना भी नहीं देखा भी नहीं. So the approximate translation is bird catcher, right? Bird hunter. I am the rose and I am the nightingale. Inside of me, I have both the lover and the beloved. You never ever made the effort to hear the lover in me, and you never ever made the effort to see the beloved in me. You are clueless, totally clueless. Now the second line of the couplet, its magnificence is beyond words. Ghalib defines love, an emotion that lives in the heart, in terms of brain. Can one even begin to understand this mastery? कहते हैं जिसको इश्क खलल है दिमाग का. Two different ends of the spectrum, heart and brain. And here comes Ghalib and he defines love, which is what fills the heart, right? In terms of brain. The answer is no. With your brain, you cannot understand this mastery of how he is defining love in terms of brain. Love should be defined in terms of heart, because that's where it resides. But Ghalib defines it in terms of brain. So, yeah, with your brain, you cannot understand this mastery, but try feeling it from your heart, and it might work. And you might understand it. Mirza Ghalib का शेर, फिर शौक कर रहा है खरीदार की तलब, अर्ज़े मताए अक्लो दिलो जां किए हुए. The approximate translation is that once again, the love of the lover is keen for a taker, by extension, the beloved. And in this eagerness, the lover is offering up, sacrificing, willingly, voluntarily, proactively, the wealth of his heart, the wealth of his life, the wealth of his mind. He will sacrifice all this willingly and proactively, even before he gets into finding the taker for his love, by extension, the beloved. All right, so that takes care of बुलबुल के कारोबार पे है खंदा-haa-e-Gul, कहते हैं जिसको इश्क खलल है दिमाग का. I hope you enjoyed the impression. As always, we'll be very keen to hear your comments and feedback. Now, for our new viewers, a strong recommendation to access the episode titled Introduction to DGMZ, because that will give you a good insight into the motivation and the inspiration behind this podcast. What are we trying to do here every weekend? For our regular viewers, whenever you have time, go to the homepage of the channel. We have multiple playlists there, segregated by topics. Surf through them and pick an episode that you like. Now, allow me to go ahead and close this episode by sending a lot of love and a lot of light to all you dear viewers, and thanks for watching.